pursue sadism towards cats. Cynthia said she enjoyed the way they scream. Being a psychiatrist, hearing these disturbing and sickening confessions is a standard protocol, but it was when she described the happy man that made my hair stand on end. Cynthia explained that when she was 16, she was visited for the first time by the happy man. She was sitting on her porch looking into the woods behind her home when she heard a man's laughter coming from within the trees. She said she had blinked, and there at the tree line stood a tall, thin man with blue veins snaking under his pale white skin. Cynthia said he wore dark, loose, blood-stained overalls, and that the skin on his face had been pulled tightly upward in and stitched in place, with a nail embedded in his upper lip, forming a grotesque smile. In an instant, the man was on her porch, standing over Cynthia. He leaned down and shrieked, "Smile," before vanishing. Over the years, Cynthia said she was visited many times by the happy man, each time hearing his maniacal laughter before he appeared. During her stay at Hampstead, Cynthia took to staring out of the windows into the woods that surround the hospital, mumbling incoherently and seemingly never blinking. When she was allowed to go outside, she would sneak out food to try and attract stray cats. When I asked why she repeatedly did this, Cynthia revealed that she had discovered by accident that the happy man was terrified by cats when he visited her while she was trapping a stray. How ironic, I thought, that she would seek salvation in the animals she tortured for pleasure. She tearfully pleaded with me to allow her to have a cat for protection, as this was against hospital policy and health code. I instead reasoned with her by purchasing stuffed cats and safe plastic toy cats to keep in her room. She seemed happy with her new guardians, and months passed without incident until I got a call around 3 a.m. on Saturday, June 7, 1997. I was called by a frantic nurse who was trying to explain what was going on, but Cynthia's screaming in the background proved hearing the nurse difficult, so I rushed in to assess the situation. When I arrived, Cynthia was kicking and screaming. As the nurses tried to hold her down, I noticed that she was covered in deep lacerations. I tried to calm her down to no avail, and I was forced to sedate her so that her wounds could be treated. After they carried her off, I noticed that the cat dolls I had given her were completely gutted and turned inside out, and her plastic toys were slashed with what looked like razors, which are not available to patients for obvious reasons. Over the next week, her condition deteriorated, and she was tormented by auditory hallucinations of the happy man's laughter. It seemed that every day she would have a new cut or gash, so I decided to place her under suicide watch. I remember our last session on June 16, in which she told me that she hadn't harmed the animals they had found in her apartment. She said the happy man had overcome his fear of cats and would come for her soon. She heard laughter from the woods. The next morning, I pulled up to Hampstead Hospital like any other day, but I was greeted by police cruisers and their flashing blue lights. An officer told me that Cynthia had killed the nurse watching over her the night prior and killed herself. I was in shock. The officer said they hadn't located the murder weapon, but the nurse's head had been bashed in by a She's visited by a tall, pale man in overalls with his facial skin stretched into a smile who cuts her arms and legs. I felt the blood in my face drain when she showed me her journal, which included a page with his drawing and caption that read, "The Happy Man." She said she can hear laughter from the woods outside the hospital. He is telling her to smile. The second story is called "Can You Help Me Find My Cat?" Her cat. I was out one night in December around midnight. It was terribly cold, being the day after Christmas. I sighed deeply, almost amused at seeing my breath. I was tired, walking home from my friend Ricky's house. We just got done eating a ton of snack food and playing Pokemon, battling over and over like when we were kids. How I miss those days. I'm 17 now and kind of a nerd. I don't have a lot of friends, but I cherish the ones I do have. I don't have a girlfriend, but do have a crush or two. Anyway, I love taking walks at night. It was so quiet and peaceful. I also really love the cool air caressing my cheeks and fingers. I sighed again, almost home. Just a block away was my house where I lived with my mom and two bratty younger sisters of 15 and 10. Part of me didn't want to go home, worried mom would catch me up late and scold me for being out alone. Suddenly, I saw her. She was pretty, kind of short, but not a child. She had wavy blonde hair and was wearing satin pants and a light blue tank top. As I got closer, I could see her face. Her pale skin was almost white as snow, with piercing green eyes. Her lips and fingers were blue. She looked very sad and very cold. I imagined it was because she was barefoot and had nothing on her arms. As I got about 3 feet away from her, she took a step toward me and said in a chilling, soft, yet raspy voice, "Can you help me find my cat?" I shrugged and tried to smile. "Sure. Where do you think he is?" She pointed to a truck parked in a driveway. I nodded and walked with her to the car. Before walking around it, I took off my jacket and offered it to her. "Here, you're gonna freeze to death." She smiled sadly, looking up at me. After a short pause, she whispered, "I already have." By then, I was getting freaked out by her. I didn't believe in ghosts or anything. Plus, I could see her breathing. I put my jacket around her shoulders, and for some reason, I was relieved when it stayed there. I exactly sure when it happened. I couldn't have been older than 5 or 6. My brother and I were sleeping in our bunk bed. Because he was older, he got the top bunk. I had just woken up, but it was still nighttime. Something felt different. I remembered seeing and smelling the rain, but not hearing any. The window was open and it was very cold in the room. Why was the window open? These curtains were gently flapping, but there was no breeze. The quiet was so intense it buzzed through my ears. I'd been lying on my side, with one arm dangling off the edge of the bed. Gradually, I became aware that it was warmer near the floor. I felt some kind of heated breeze gently strike my hand, coming and going in short bursts. Finally, I recognized it as someone's breathing. Then the woman slid out from under my bed. The nightlight showed that she had long, blondish hair and wore a white nightgown. And in the dimness, I thought it was my mother. I wasn't at all scared. It's funny how a child minds work. What's mommy doing under the bed? Must be getting something or checking for monsters. I was too tired to say anything and remained motionless, watching. The woman was on her back, but her face stayed in the shadows. She rolled over and crawled on all fours to the far end of the bed, then glided up the ladder to the top bunk. Her every movement was silky smooth and completely silent. She reminded me of a white ribbon dancing in the wind. I closed my eyes and fell back to sleep. I also remembered my brother telling me about a weird dream the next morning. He dreamt of a woman who lived under the floor and came out at night to play in the rain. When her clothes got soaked, she went back inside and would whisper things to anyone who was sleeping. It became a recurring dream for him until our family moved out of that house. Strange what the brain chooses to remember. Next story is called My Son Sees the Boy He's Named After Who Passed Away. My son is one of the most honest little boys I have ever met. I'm biased, I know, but still. I was very young when my son was conceived, and he was a huge shock to both me and his father, as I was on birth control. Nevertheless, he was most loved and spoiled little boy ever. He is literally the light of all my darkness. There is definitely a reason as to why he's here, planned or not. He's meant for this world. My ex, the father of my son, had a best friend who died exactly a year before the birth of my son. We will call him Dean. Sadly, passed away on the 13th of July. My son was born exactly a year later on the 13th of July. Dean tragically lost his life from jumping into open water on a hot day, and his body was instantly went into a shock. He suffered a major heart attack and died within seconds. He was extremely talented and thoughtful guy, and it was a huge loss for everyone that knew him. When I found out I was pregnant with a little boy, my ex and I came to the decision to have Dean as my son's middle name, as a tribute to his friend. We were extremely shocked when my due date was on the 13th, and even more shocked when my son was born on his due date too. We always knew there will always be is very dangerous. My ex was stunned. He nodded and said, "That's right, and that's how Dean had died." It's so true that children are open to so much more than us adults. To this day, neither me or my ex can explain what happened other than Dean visiting my son. The next story is called I Am the End of the World. The world is ending, and I think I'm to blame. It started about a month ago. Small clusters of suicides popping up in New Jersey. 6 students sleeping in front of commuter train in Princeton. 4 families in Camden linked to domestic murder or suicides. 3 drownings in Trenton. Although out of the ordinary, no one made a connection right off the bat. As I turn on the news this morning, it's all I see on national and international news. It's been dubbed the millennial plague. I'm not entirely sure as to why. The news reports are filled with shaky camera videos from Los Angeles of business people from entire floors of office buildings, smashing out windows and leaping hand in hand to their death, to school teachers in Beijing leading their smiling students into interstate traffic. The toll has passed into hundreds of millions with no end in sight. 2 weeks after the initial outbreak, a news reporter from San Francisco was live and reporting some of the recent events when he stood up and repeatedly smashed his head off the corner of the news desk to everyone's horror. The video was cut as he fell to the ground, but the cameraman kept filming, and within a few hours the remainder of the video surfaced online. As the reporter slumped to the ground, his co-anchor rushed over to his aid. She leaned over to check his smashed-in head when all of a sudden she stood up and ran straight through the glass window and dropped 26 stories to her death. As the camera continued to roll, 6 other people, including the cameraman, followed suit. Planes started falling from the sky, apparently from their pilots flying directly into the ground. Videos of commuter trains smashing through hundreds of people lined up on the tracked surfaces from everywhere from Moscow to Madrid. Commuter buses smashed through barricades and whirled off of bridges. Parents holding the hand of their children doused themselves in kerosene and proceeded to light their family, seemingly emotionless. All of this carnage, this death, the funeral of the human race at the hands of a relentless, unseen enemy, is primarily because of me. I was hired by Bioweapons Agency to develop a weapon that could cause an enemy to self-harm, therefore putting no one else at risk. The first thing that came into my mind was spinochordotes teleni, a parasite pneumotomorphic hairworm that is able to influence its host's behavior. As I worked with this little killing machine, the first thing that I accomplished was making these guys become susceptible to humans, as they were only effective in grasshoppers and other small invertebrates. Once I had figured out how to make them rewire the human psyche, I dabbled in seeing if I could turn this parasite into a virus. messed up. I think I have developed an antivirus to millennial plague, but honestly, I have been really considering to ending things. The last story is called This Happened to Me When I Was a Kid. Still haunts me. I was 10 years old and I lived on the outskirts of Little Rock, Arkansas. This would have been 1999. We lived on a big 5-acre lot, with the house set very far back in the lot. Directly in front of the house was a pretty standard front yard with just grass, except for a lone pine tree. The rest of the lot was all forested with a long driveway. A lone street light illuminated the front yard and parking area at night. I snuck out of my room and into the living room after my family went to bed so that I could watch European Vacation. A friend had lent it to me because it had boobs in it. I fell asleep during the movie at some point and I woke up with the blue light of my TV when it ejects the movie after it finished. I turned the TV off, but I was a little bit afraid of the dark at that age, and my living room was big and opened into the dining room. The whole thing looked dark and ominous, so I wanted to hurry up. The living room had those really tall ranch house windows, 3 in a row, so some light was coming in from the street light. I looked out the windows. There was a man standing next to the lone pine tree in the front yard, and he was illuminated by the street light and surrounded on all sides by the darkened forest of our yard. He was staring directly at where I was standing. He was wearing blue jeans and a blue collared t-shirt, like the kind you get at Eddie Bauer. He also had a baseball cap that was dark blue or black. I was so terrified. I stood there for a moment looking, and he stared back. Then he began to move towards the house. I ran to my parents' bedroom, sobbing and screaming, "There is a man outside! There's a man outside!" I'll never forget or stop loving my dad for the look of fear and anger on his face when he saw how distressed I was. Without hesitating or questioning what I was saying, he grabbed his baseball bat from under the bed and ran like I had never seen him before. He was a champion athlete in a former life, but his knees and hips had failed him, so he was now an educator and a baker who moved very slowly. There was none outside and I felt relieved and embarrassed. My parents sat with me for a bit in my bedroom and I told them I was sorry for staying up late, and I sobbed and sobbed. They told me that it was okay and that it didn't matter, and eventually I fell asleep. For the next 2 weeks I was too terrified to sleep. One of my parents had to sit there with the lights on and read a book until I passed out. I remember constantly looking to my parents for comfort whenever I felt afraid. Eventually, I felt better and I told my parents that I could sleep without them in the room. However, the dark now terrified me and I would constantly turn on my lamp and check the room. If the door to my bedroom was ever open, my imagination would run wild with the terrors out in the hallway. After a couple weeks of this, on a night when I managed to fall asleep, I woke up for some reason during the middle of the night. My room was on the back side of our one-story house and looked out over our back deck. My blinds were closed, but I heard someone walking around the deck. I shut my eyes so tightly that I can still bring myself back to this moment if I shut my eyes tight even now. I stopped breathing. I heard more footsteps outside. I opened them again, and there was a big dark shape in front of my blinds. It was standing right next to my window, but not moving. I opened the blinds We saw